Have you ever felt intimidated? I've got Ken up front here to the sound of music, and then I've got a doctor after me, so I'm not sure what that says, but we'll see how we go. So I'd like to be able to give you all the answers, but as you would be aware, or maybe not, that IPART is still out for consultation on the criteria. So we'll see what we can do and work with what we've got at the moment. I don't think it'll change drastically, but I think it's worth preparing a submission in some form to IPART to have a look at the criteria. So for those of you that haven't been involved, I thought I'd just give you a very, very quick history of how this process took place. So I'll try and work through. Okay. So in 2011 there was a forum called Destination 2036 held in Dubbo. It was representing all of the mayors and general managers in local government to talk about the future of local government, and that was generated by the Office of Local Government. After that, there were a couple of reviews done by TCOR and sustainability, and also on infrastructure. The then president of the Shires Association and the president of the Local Government Association made representation to the Premier at the time, Barry O'Farrell, to conduct an independent review of local government, which basically they formed the Independent Local Government Review Panel. They published their final report, and I've got the findings for you. And then that resulted in a document called Fit for the Future, and that's what we're currently dealing with. And IPART has been appointed in April as the independent panel. So if we have a look at the Independent Local Government Review Panel final report, there were 65 recommendations with 12 key themes. And basically it's about increasing capacity of local government and being able to increase it through technology and through your workforce and through partnerships with state government. So you can access that and you can read that at your own leisure. The Office of Local Government Reform objective was to create strategic and fit for the future councils that are financially sustainable, efficient with the capacity to effectively manage infrastructure and deliver services, the scale, resources and strategic capacity to govern effectively and partner with the state, and has the capacity to reduce red tape, bureaucracy for business, and of a scale and structure that is broadly in line with the panel's recommendations. So there are three proposals, three templates. Basically the merger proposal that aligns with the Local Government Review Panel recommendations. The improvement proposal, which is the councils have been recommended to stand alone, and that's basically what I'll be talking about today. And template 3, which is rural councils, so councils that don't meet any criteria and don't have an increasing population that basically are relying on grants. So at IPART at the consultation day in Sydney the other day, they basically are going to rate in 3 different methods. One is fit, so you're fit if your submission is broadly consistent with the Independent Local Government Review Panel's recommendations and satisfy overall the other criteria of sustainability. Secondly, you're not fit, so your proposal does not satisfy scale and capacity criteria or does not satisfy the other criteria. And then not assessed as deemed not to be fit for those councils that are not elected to place a submission. So the 4 criteria are around sustainability, effective infrastructure and service management, efficiency and scale and capacity. Now most of those have got financial benchmarks in them, but the first one on scale and capacity. Scale and capacity in the Independent Local Government Review Panel's final report, there were 10 key issues that were raised, and basically with your scale and capacity you need to review those 10 particular items which are listed there. And for Campbelltown, we're basing our case on being a regional city centre identified in the metropolitan strategy. We're going to base our case about accessing a skilled labour force, We've implemented special variation. We're going to show how we can deliver projects on time and work with other levels of government. So our conclusion will be Campbelltown is a thriving city with the space, the people and the vision to make things happen. We actively seek to take advantage of opportunities for development and transformation while maintaining our position as leaders on regional business, employment, health and education. We boast a highly skilled and industrious workforce, great accessibility, affordable land, sound infrastructure and an attractive lifestyle. And really, in addressing scale and capacity, I do recommend you look outside of the council. So just don't look inwardly, look at your community, look at what facilities you have and what makes you unique in your particular area and in your particular local government area. Because while we were doing the boot camps for local government New South Wales, it was quite impressive going out to some of the councils and some of the things that they'd actually put in place because they needed to. So they created their own innovation just through the need. So sustainability, and there are three criteria around sustainability. Operating performance ratio, which is total continuing operating revenue excluding capital grants and contributions, less operating expenses over total operating revenue. Now I don't know what it needs to be a ratio. It's basically your operational result, but nevertheless they do need to be a ratio, probably to get somebody at TCOR in a job. But so what's this mean? Operating is a core measure for financial sustainability. Ongoing deficits are unsustainable, and probably most of us would agree with that. Although there are some other indicators, and I'll go into that a little bit later in the presentation. Provides an indication of how a council generates revenue and allocates expenditure, reflects ongoing sustainability, and also the impact on depreciation and contribution standard. And there's a body of work that needs to be done around depreciation, in my opinion, and I'll speak about that later. When IPART reviewed the benchmarks for the Office of Local Government, they commented that an operating deficit of 3%, up to a surplus of 10% should be acceptable and should be averaged over 3 years. Some of the points that they made were that operating deficits are okay in the short term but not the long term. A break-even operating performance ratio indicates that a council can fund asset maintenance and renewals required by the consumption of assets. This enables capital grants and contributions to remain available to fund infrastructure renewals and or asset upgrades. Highly sensitive to how councils estimate on depreciation expense, as this is often a high proportion of total expenses. So what's it affected by? Expansion of council's role. So obviously if your role is expanding, it's increasingly difficult to measure. The significant increase in the local government index, so for the materials that we need to use. The changes in the demographic profile, so your ageing population, that can also be a major hurdle, especially in small communities. The socio-economic disadvantage in coming from Campbelltown, we certainly have some challenges, and I noticed on the TV the other night that Blacktown might have a few difficulties as well. Nice positive press. Unforeseeable events such as natural disasters. So the average for local government in this index is -6%, and this data is drawn out by the Office of Local Government from a review done from 2010 to 2013, with metropolitan councils averaging a deficit of 2.5%, and rural and regional councils with a little bit more work to do at -7, 7.5%. So what does it actually look like? And I've just used a little bit of our data, and this is only draft data, so don't take this as gospel, because my finance manager says that you're joking and online and things like that. But we've actually put in a special rate variation, so one of the things that we've done is to actually improve our operating result. Just on the final slide, I used this for the boot camps, it was just an indicator of traffic lights, that, you know, if you were trending down, you were going to be in a fair bit of difficulty. If you hadn't met the benchmark that you were improving, IPART would probably look at that as a positive thing. And obviously, if you're above the benchmark and you're improving, then you've got a pretty good case for your submission. So own source revenue. Own source revenue is total operating revenue less grants and contributions over the total continuing operating revenue inclusive of capital grants and contributions. So what does that mean? Well, the benchmark is 60, greater than 60. The measure measures the degree of reliance on external funding sources, so how much we rely on grants and contributions. Measures the flexibility and the robustness of your income. It provides greater capacity. I know at Campbelltown, for a number of years we've been working on our short-term indicators, and it does, once you do that, you increase your capacity, it does increase your flexibility, certainly from a cash flow point of view. It may be a little bit easier for us being a larger council, but it's one of the things that was just driven by a strategy, bringing the council on board, minimising our borrowing, making sure that we hit budget targets, and just really good management techniques. And it's broader than the earlier use ratio of rate coverage, although when IPART reviewed this, they want to go back to rates and fees and charges. So the New South Wales average on own source revenue was just under 60%, marginally below the benchmark. Metropolitan Council's average own source revenue of about 70%, revenues well above the benchmark of 60. Regional councils are greater than 60, so going okay. And rural councils, as you would expect, are averaging around about 50%. And as we know, rural councils are fairly heavily reliant on grants and contributions. So that's what it looks like for us at the moment. As I said, we had a special rate variation. Our fees and charges and other sources of revenue are pretty strong. So we meet the benchmark. Once again, on the right-hand side, just a traffic light indicator of what's trending. If you're trending down, if you're improving, then your proposal will be probably supported by IPART. And if you're above the benchmark, the submission's looking pretty good once again. So the final benchmark here is building and infrastructure asset renewal, and I do have a problem with a lot of the asset indicators, but I'll talk about that in a short period of time. So it's asset renewals, which is information that basically comes from Special Schedule 7, and that's informed by your asset management system, so it's fairly important that your asset management system has a fair amount of credibility about it. Over depreciation, amortisation and impairment. I think there's a little bit of double counting and have to have a benchmark of 100%, but nevertheless we'll see where that actually ends up in the long run. So what does it mean? It's a comparison of proportions spent on infrastructure asset renewal as against asset deterioration. And in their opinion, depreciation aligned with deterioration. I don't necessarily agree with that, but engineers get it wrong, and finance people maybe from time to time have to have a look at themselves. I wouldn't say they get it wrong. Not as much as engineers anyway. High ratio. No, it's very important that we work with you more closely, as I convinced you. High ratio is an indicator of strong performance. Obviously the impact of depreciation and the definition of renewal. So there's certainly some different interpretations about renewal about those other people I spoke about with the stuff to be and with accountants. So where are we with the benchmark at the moment? Well, the New South Wales average is 70%, and that's right through rural, metropolitan and regional. So we're all in the same boat as far as this indicator goes. And what does it look like for Campbelltown? It looks pretty ordinary. One of the things I'll say is that we went to the council with basically a target of improving our assets to an acceptable standard within a 10-year period of time. And we've put in a strategy for a special rate variation to make sure that our assets are maintained at the appropriate level. And we've said to the council that if you invest this money, if you borrow, if you use some of the money within our reserve, that all of our assets in 10 years will be up to an acceptable standard. Now, if I go to them with an indicator like this, obviously they would challenge me and say, well, you told us that we're going to be up to speed in 10 years. Now, I could use the old chestnut of, well, it's not 10 years, but as you can see, I mean, that's challengeable. So it doesn't help that argument, and you're looking at financial information as against your asset maintenance information. So it is going to become critically important that we speak with our asset managers and accountants get together to make sure that we have a very clear path. And then I think that there's a body of work that needs to be done around depreciation and how we actually account for depreciation. And that's going to be a challenge because the Australian Accounting Standards Board are very difficult to convince otherwise. So as you can see, there's a fair few challenges for us still. We borrowed $10 million this financial year to fund some of the asset renewal, and we still haven't met the target. If we were fully fund depreciation, it's over $28.5 million at the moment, so that's quite a challenge for us, and it would be a challenge for most councils. So the next criteria, working this really well, and good with technology, can you? No videos here, mate. The next criteria is around effective infrastructure and service management, and most of these relate to assets. As a young bloke, I try to get away from assets, and the more I've worked in local government, the less I'm getting away from them. Tell you what. Obviously the benchmark is estimated cost to bring assets to a satisfactory condition over the total written down value of infrastructure, buildings, other structures. I have a problem with written down value. I think that it can distort the ratio, and I've actually put a submission into IPART around this, but I think that there's also been representations to the Office of Local Government about written down value and comparing it to the estimated cost of bringing assets to a satisfactory condition is challengeable, and it can distort the ratio, especially where you have a number of assets that have been written down to their residual value, and what you're holding in information about bringing them up to standard. So that could be 100% and you just distort the ratio. That's in this crudest form. So what does it mean? It indicates a proportionate backlog as against the total value of infrastructure assets. It measures the extent of assets required to maintain or improve service delivery in a sustainable way. High infrastructure backlogs and ratios and an inability to reduce this ratio in the near future indicates an underperforming council in terms of infrastructure management and delivery. And should gross book value or total replacement cost be used as the denominator? It was interesting, I was at, as I said, I was at the IPART consultation day in Sydney 2 weeks ago, and there was a member from the public there, and they actually spoke about using total replacement cost. And I thought, geez, I'm pleased it doesn't work in our council. He live in our council area, because this guy was fully informed and knew what he was talking about. And there wasn't much support for the local government review by all of the members of the public that were at that consultation day, which I found interesting. So what's the good news? Well, there's not much good news about this ratio. Over 6% of councils meet the benchmark, and 94% of us have got a fair amount of work to do. So as you can see at Campbelltown, as I said, we've put in a special rate variation. So we've done extra borrowing, so we're trending the right way, and we can put the improvement proposal to IPART around this indicator. But it is challenging, and as you can see, if you can't address it, and if you don't fully fund your asset maintenance, then it's going to be a challenge to be able to put in a submission that actually ticks the box. And obviously, you know, if you're trending down, you've got an improvement proposal that I think you can put to IPART, and if you're actually meeting the benchmark, then you've got a good case. So the next ratio is the asset maintenance ratio, and all this information is taken out of your asset maintenance and asset management system. So I've actually said in my submission to IPART that, you know, maybe we need some consistency. What are we going to use, and what are the indicators going to be? So, I mean, this is fairly obvious. It reflects the actual maintenance expenditure relative to the required asset maintenance. So, a measure of the asset degradation or renewal, and therefore has a role in informing asset renewal and capital works. It is implied by TCORD that a measure of less than 100% indicates a worsening backlog. That's fairly obvious. And having a look at your definition of maintenance as it gets renewal. So the benchmark's 100%. In 2000, once again in the Office of Local Government Comparative Data, only 19% of councils meet the benchmark. And most of these councils are metropolitan. And once again, there's a body of work to be done there. I was listening to the radio the other day on the way to work, and they highlighted that one council has got an approval for a 50% rate increase over the next 4 years. And my personal assistant has actually moved into that council as a neighbouring council. And I said, well, you didn't really appreciate the value for money you get from Campbelltown. So, as you can see from the Campbelltown data, as I said, we've had a special rate variation, so we're committed to maintaining our assets to an acceptable level and not increasing the backlog. But if you're not doing that, then you're going to have a very difficult time in preparing your submission and convincing IPART that you will be fit for the future. The debt service ratio, back to a good old definition, cost of debt service over continuing operating revenue, excluding capital grants and contributions. I don't believe that a council that doesn't need to borrow should be declared unfit under this benchmark if they meet all the other criteria, and I think that's a big thing. I know some councils that don't have debt, but they have massive infrastructure backlogs. In the current market, I don't understand that. Like, why people wouldn't go out and borrow, and you've got the local infrastructure renewal scheme. It doesn't make any sense at all to me. If you had an infrastructure backlog that you were crying, oh, look, we're debt free. So it just means that you're overtaxing your community, in my opinion. However, there are councils out there that are in that favour. It reflects intergenerational equity. I think everybody should pay their way at some particular point in time, although my son doesn't believe that. He's 29. Prudent debt usage assists in smoothing fund costs. Inadequate debt may mean higher rates to fund long life assets. A stronger proxy indicator of council strategic capacity. The implied that councils have some level of debt, and as I said, it's greater than zero, so the flavour for not borrowing is certainly drawn from a state government perspective, and to be fit you need something greater than zero, less than 20%. You need to model all of this. Obviously it needs to be modelled. My team are modelling it consistently, how much we can borrow, what that means to us, especially in the low interest rate environment, and I'm a bit of a fruitcake as far as borrowing goes, so some of the staff don't like that, but I think that it definitely has its place, and I think intergenerational equity is something that should be looked at in terms of long life assets, and one part of the generation should not pay for capital improvement. Our rates shouldn't reflect that either. So our debt service ratio, we still have plenty of capacity, which is really good, because we've done a body of work, and basically we did that body of work because when I first went to Campbelltown, 25% of our, so $1 in every 4 was going to retiring of debt. We were growing, we had an extensive growth, and it was a real challenge, and we had no flexibility around that. But now with the modelling that takes place, there's certainly some capacity there, and I would encourage all of you to model it if you're not borrowing, and you have capacity to borrow, then you certainly should have a bit of a squeeze over. So the last criteria is efficiency, and this is real operating expenditure per capita. So what's it mean? It's the capacity to secure economies of scale over time, being a key indicator of efficiency. I think that that's contestable. The capacity to secure efficiency improvements can be measured with respect to a range of factors, population, assets, financial turnover. Assuming that service levels remain constant, decline in real expenditure per capita indicates efficiency improvements, but where you have a fairly static population or a population that's increasing, you're really going to have a problem meeting this criteria. I think that it's not really a measure. I mean, while cost shifting ever takes place, and our cost shifting figures somewhere up near $7 million, so, you know, we wouldn't need to have a rate increase if we didn't have to have a cost shifting of $7 million. That's what we had in our special rate variation. And the other thing is that changes in legislation also add to the costs. So it's certainly something that I think is a real challenge, reducing the cost of services. However, there are some things that you can put in place to have a look at service reviews, zero-based budgeting and things like that. So there are a few of the things, and that's the criteria. Having conducted the boot camps, there was a few things that I did the boot camps with Dennis Benesevic, and we had a great time. And Dennis came up with some observations, and I certainly, having dealt with a number of councils during the boot camps, we come up with a few things that we thought might help people in their submissions. So if you're putting a submission in and you don't meet some of the criteria, like real operating expenditure or certainly some of the operational operating revenue and the like, you may like to use, if your short-term indicators are strong, but you're operating in a deficit, but you have a good current ratio, you have a good liquidity ratio, well, why don't you put that in your submission and just show that you are strong, and it's the indicators that are important and maybe not actually the operating result. Because depreciation at the moment, I think, is a real distorting factor in this whole exercise. And as we've said, there is a lack of liquidity ratios. Liquidity does reflect short-term sustainability. Then the long-term financial plan that we do, I say that it's critical that we actually concentrate on the indicators more than the numbers. And the information from your asset management system needs to be really, really solid. The operating performance ratio, once again, depreciation is an issue. Zero-based approach to budgeting. Know the true cost and the subsidy for your services, so that if you're actually operating your services a lot more than what you expect to, you don't think it's the best use of your resources, then you need to have a review of those particular services, how you can deliver them better, or whether you need to invest more money to improve whatever you're doing, and maybe you can get more bang for your buck. The own source revenue, having a look at the alternative income streams. I know at Campbelltown we've got onto some of the telcos that are using our parks. So just using a passive park, you can create some funding out of that. Increasing your rating base. So as I said, IPART just approved a 50% increase for a council very close to us over a 4-year period. Having a look at your fees and charges, making sure that your fees and charges do truly reflect the cost of your services and that you are recuperating the right amount. And look at where some capital grants and contributions actually might be operating and you're putting them into capital. So it's worth a look at. The asset ratios, not just combined all these, because basically the issues are all the same. You know, consistency in where you're going to access the information. Reviewing your depreciation methodology, I think, is really important to reflect some sort of consumption depreciation and actually reflect the true consumption of the asset. Look at your definition of renewals and see whether you're putting things into renewals that are maintenance or maintenance into renewals, so vice versa. Effective management systems, I've already spoken about borrowing. For the asset backlog, use of the gross book value, I've intended to, I think that's probably a better way to go. And we did an exercise just this morning before I came up, and it knocked our ratio from being unacceptable to acceptable. I just don't have the figures in front of me, so I can't verify that, so you have to take me on my word. And maintenance, you know, it's critical that you do fund your maintenance and keep that up to speed. Debt service ratio, I've probably already spoken about. The previous indicator was 10%. You need to have a look at internal borrowing if you've got some capacity there. Although if you're going to access those, obviously you have to borrow externally at the moment. Councils are strongly encouraged to increase their borrowing for new assets and renewals. And previous gold to be debt-free is no longer favoured. And as I said, what about the councils that actually don't need to borrow? They should not be unfit just because they don't meet this criteria. That's a fairly obvious observation. Real operating expenditure per capita, have a look at zero-based budgeting, try and find out your true cost of services, focus your management attention to controlling costs and self-improvement. It's one of the things that we've done in Campbelltown to really put some rigour around our budgets, and maximise the value of money for the services that you do provide and the resources that you allocate. So some of the things that you can do are diversify your income stream. As I said, have a look at SRVs. It certainly seems to be more palatable at the moment and easier to get through IPART. Have a look at your fees and charges and make sure that you are recovering the right amount. Do some benchmarking and making sure that you are charging the right amount. If you've got capacity to charge, I don't see a problem with that. Property development and other entrepreneurial activities, it's one of the things that we do. We've had a look at some of the things that over the years we've had shopping centres and neighbourhood stores and just filled gaps where there haven't been those particular services. So it's one of the things that I think local government do well, and it's some income streams that you might be able to access. The other thing is to have a look at your service levels. So, review your service levels. We are having a look at some of our service levels. We're looking at not continuing some of those particular services. Obviously, there's a whole range of community consultation around that, and consultation with the staff and unions and etc. But it's not about fit for the future. I mean, it's about the allocation of resources, and we all know how tough it is when you get a rate increase, and all of the rate increase does is pay the increase in wages. Consider service consolidation. So to get economies of scale, you might be able to have a look at a couple of services that you can put together and actually operate them more effectively. Research alternative sources of income and ideas for service funding, so sponsorships and whether different people would like to be partners in what we're doing. Investigate other service delivery models, and that's one of the things that we've done. Shared services, we're having a look at, JOs are proposed, so joint organisations are proposed, so whether you can share services, administration resources, strategic relationships with government or NGOs. We've done a body of work with some of our state government people. We've redeveloped a public housing estate, which has been an absolutely mind-blowing success. It's given us a whole range of new assets. It's also provided an income stream that we've put into our asset renewal fund. And it's just been a magnificent social outcome more than anything, so that's been extremely successful. Community-run services, so there might be services that you're delivering that the community are delivering, and we've just found one ourselves. We provide a bus for people to go to a cemetery because we don't have a cemetery within our local government area, so these people are elderly, they want to visit their loved ones, the departed, but there's actually a not-for-profit actually doing it as well. So they're going to pick up the slack for us and they're going to do that. So that means that, normally one of the boys on the outdoor staff does the driving and they can concentrate on what they need to do. Outsource to the market. It's always a challenge, but it's something that we sort of need to do. And certainly within the Independent Local Government Review Panel recommendations, increasing capacity through technology. And it's one of the things that I keep on talking about at work, about e-business and being able to increase our capacity in terms of getting out to the community, our messages, our services, and their payments through electronic gateways. So some of the other things we're looking at is asset rationalisation. We've withdrawn from a couple of agreements with the Department of Education. One was the hall, one was the library. 100-year agreement was a great idea 40 years ago that just doesn't work in this day and age with children and child protection legislation, fences around schools, access to halls, access to libraries over a longer period of time. So we both agreed that we would withdraw from there. It took us 12 months, but we got there. We built a $12 million facility at Ingleburn, a community centre and a library. One of the things that I spoke to the council about, there were 2 libraries close by, and we didn't move on those libraries, so we had 3 libraries at the time. We withdrew from Minto, but there's another one that's about 5 minutes away. And this community centre and library is underutilised, and we put $12 million into that, so that's a missed opportunity. We're doing an open space review. We're having a look at Poplar Parks, but one of the messages is that we really want to improve our regional parks and put in better facilities. And how are we going to fund that? Well, if you've got too many assets, then maybe you need to start getting rid of some. And the other thing is that we've had a look at our buildings. One of our halls is not being fully utilised, and we just put it on the market and sold it. And there's a range of houses and buildings that we shouldn't even had our name on, and we've just not put them down. So obviously there's no asset backlog anymore, and also no asset maintenance. So it's a double tick. Get on board. So increasing capacity, there are some things, some ideas that you can do. We actually punched the regional road through to Campbelltown Railway Station. Surprise, surprise, we own all the land there. And it's just opened up all this development opportunity for all that land. So that's just coincidence. But yeah, if you believe that, I can say anything. I'll talk to you later. Ground leases around hotels, McDonald's and Aldi. Neighbourhood stores, we've got some subdivision potential out at Menangle Park. We also have a magnificent trotting club out there. They've moved from Harold Park in Sydney out to Menangle Park, and there's probably the highest profile that we have internationally. It goes to Hong Kong. Most of it's funded through the TAB, so we don't need to put any money in it, but it's a great facility, and they want to partner with us, so that'll certainly help us increase capacity. We redeveloped our swimming centres, improved our swimming centres, and we've invested more money into that, and it's actually made them more cost effective because more people want to use them, and we have a massive increase in our local swim. Just promote innovation. I've seen it right through the country visits that we had with local government in New South Wales, and some of the stuff that just little things, but little things make big differences to small communities. And procurement, I think. You can use local government procurement. You can do procurement from a regional point of view. Just access economies of scale. Believe it or not, I always bang on about sustainability. I think that it makes sense. It makes good environmental sense, and it makes good economic sense. So why not do it? Whether you believe in greenhouse emissions and all this other stuff, well, that's up to you. But I just think that it makes complete sense from an economy point of view and from a social point of view. But we put in a whole range of solar panels. We have a sustainability accounting tool that we report back to the council. We reviewed our air conditioning, how we build, our building design to make sure that's effective. We put some water tanks in childcare centres to recycle water, and also in parks. And we've actually biobanking, and there might be some opportunities for country councils to have a look at biobanking and not have to maintain those particular areas. I just wanted to speak to you just for a moment about opportunities. So what's the finance sector response going to be to all of these particular things? And if I told you a story going back a little way, and this is hopefully not boring you, but when the local government used to do fund accounting, and if you don't know what that is, I can't really tell you because I'm too young, but it was just a different type of accounting, and we moved to the Australian Accounting Standard. There was an exposure draft delivered, and there was no response from local government except for one body, which was the South West Accountants Discussion Group. So obviously we moved on to the Australian Accounting Standard, and the good thing that came out of that was that we actually created local government professionals, finance professionals. And the first exercise they did was to work with the Office of Local Government and develop a code of accounting practice. So that's going back quite a few years, but it was a really positive outcome. So I think that talking to you, I do encourage you to get together and try and get your head around this, and it's a great opportunity for you to network and for you to think about how you will liaise with each other. You have a great amount of knowledge. It's been something, as a young person when I first went to the city, I worked for a man by the name of Dick Carl, and that name might resonate with all of you. I'm presenting his award, his memorial award tonight. And he took me to the first accounting discussion group as it was then. And the knowledge and just the passion in that room was something that, as a young bloke, really knocked me over. So if I could deliver one thing to you, one idea, is to work with each other, help each other. I mean, this is the biggest challenge that local governments face for quite some time, and there's a lot, and I think this is an opportunity for you now. Having said that, it's a time for us to improve. We need to have a look at ourselves, and we need to have a serious look at improving how we deliver our services to our community. And remember that this is about our community. It's not about the state government, and it's not about us. It's about our communities and how we deliver to the community. And if we can do things better, then we should. So if I could just leave you with one thought. I was at the Bradman Museum the other day, and believe it or not, I live in the Southern Highlands, and I actually never been there. And this is a quote from Sir Donald Bradman. So forget that it's an athlete, and say, I place great store on certain qualities which I believe to be essential in addition to skill. They are that a person conducts his or her life with dignity, with integrity, with courage, and perhaps most of all, modesty. These virtues are totally compatible with pride, ambition, determination, and competitiveness. Thank you.
Real quick, any questions for Mick before? Oh, we have a question. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Got the president.
I have a small question. You said when you did the redevelopment of the swimming pool, it led to better utilities. So I wanted to find out, was the improvement in utilities synonymous with better cost recovery? Now, could you say as a result of that you've now achieved better cost recovery, which is what you're actually looking for when you talk about for the future?
When we actually, we have two regional swimming facilities that both have Olympic-sized pools, and they're used extensively by the schools to run school carnivals. So none of them actually met environmental standards as far as the health department was concerned. So what we had to do is completely strip out the pool and put in more of an environmental look at the pool, and it actually improved the aesthetics of the pool. It wasn't done in terms of increasing our income. It was actually done to provide a better service. And once we started, we decided that we'd fix the amenities, we'd fix the barbecue areas, we'd make it more aesthetically pleasing, we'd fix the area where you came into the pool. And the result of it was, because we actually provided a better facility, we had more people coming. So it's increased their position, their financial position, as far as basically they almost break even, which is quite unusual for a pool. Any more questions? Look, I'll be around. I'm around tonight. I'm around this afternoon. You'll probably find me close to a bar somewhere. I'm more than happy for you to shout if anybody would like to do that. But I'm quite happy to chat to you as well. Cheers, everyone. Thank you.